Welcome back to the Business of Aesthetics podcast. I'm your host, Don Adeesha. In an industry growing as fast as aesthetics, it's easy to get distracted by the noise. We see new devices, new trends, and new experts popping up every day. But as the market matures, the practice that will be left standing are the ones built on a foundation of unshakable clinical integrity. To help us understand what that foundation looked like, we are joined by an industry legend, Tracey Hotta. Tracey has been advancing the field of aesthetic nursing for over 3 decades. She is not just a practitioner, she's a guardian of standards. She is the past editor of the Plastic Surgical Nursing Journal, a past president of ISPAN, ISPAN, and one of the most respected voices on safety and ethics in North America. Today, we are moving beyond the hype. We are discussing what evidence based practice actually means, why the future of our industry depends on better education, and how to protect your business by adhering to the highest ethical standards. This episode is brought to you by Echo Marketing, the digital growth partner behind this podcast and a trusted resource for aesthetic practices looking to dominate their local markets. With that being said, Tracey, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dawn. It's good to be back on the show again.
Absolutely. Now, Tracey, the term evidence-based practice is often used as a marketing buzzword, but a few actually understand. Past editor of the Plastic Surgical Nursing Journal. How do you specifically define evidence-based decision making in a field that is so heavily driven by manufacturer marketing?
Thank you. That is a great question. And I have been very fortunate with having a lot of career opportunities in the past that have built me to where I am today. And one of those positions was the past editor of the PSN Journal. I was the editor for 8 years, and this position taught me the importance of critically analyzing articles, clinical articles, and checking the references for accuracy. So this does extend into aesthetics, as there's a lot of claims on social media, whether it's from providers or industry, that are not based on research, but are personal opinions or marketing strategies. So as ethical providers, we have to be able to distinguish between the two. Evidence-based means making decisions regarding education that are best available for us, best available evidence, and not just relying on our experience. So definitely having experience is important, but we need to be able to critically analyze articles to base our practice on. There's also some untested ideas, so that would be KOLs. So a lot of us will go to meetings and you'll have KOLs that'll be on the stage where they're providing or teaching or presenting on different procedures or devices. And we have to realize that these KOLs are being paid by industry to promote their products. And we have to determine whether what they're teaching is based on evidence-based or is it just marketing. So we're always telling people that what is being said on stage may not be something you want to build into your practice. So evidence-based decision-making encourages that critical analyzing clinical studies that are related to aesthetics and professionalism. That's my whole platform is all on professionalism, so that we can decide what's going to be best for our practices.
Okay. And Tracey, do you believe that manufacturers have too much influence over evidence that reaches the average injector?
I find that some will really try to push their marketing without having that evidence based. I mean, what we tell people is always to ask for the white papers that and clinical articles and clinical studies that they've done to support what they're teaching on or their device that they have. It's getting better. I would say it's getting better, and I think practitioners are getting using more of their clinical judgment when they're looking at devices.
Okay. So, it's totally normal for, a provider to ask the manufacturers for the white papers, is it?
Mhm. White papers, and also we do suggest that they ask for the say if it's like with Health Canada if they have their device number, their regulation or their licensing number, or if it's a cosmetic, that they have their cosmetic registration number as well.
Okay, gotcha. And now we are currently seeing a flood of providers entering the market with weekend certifications. When a practice owner is evaluating a training program or a new hire, what are the specific markers that distinguish a curriculum rooted in rigorous science from one that is simply teaching a recipe?
There's a lot of different teaching models out there for training companies because there's no regulatory body or there's no standards that will standardize a program. So some programs are based on experience, but they're lacking the clinical evidence. And some are taught by providers that only have 2 or 3 years experience. And I think you need to have a marriage of both so that you can base your teaching on experience that you've had in the past, and learning from your mistakes is what I say. After being in this for 36 years, I had a lot of mistakes that I learned from, and I will pass that on to people taking a program. In my opinion, practice owners should be looking at a program that mirrors the two qualities. And when someone says that they're accredited, that should be a red flag because anybody that is certified, or sorry, with the accredited, but anybody that's certified in a specialty knows that it's your certification qualifiers are more than just taking a weekend course. And some companies will use that as a marketing tool, saying that you become a certified cosmetic nurse specialist after taking their program, but you need experience. You need years of experience in order to get that qualification to be certified. But the program should be accredited, because if they're accredited, then it means that it's been vetted through clinical research, so through a credentialing body that is outside of your training company. And also professional standards and code of ethics. That needs to be part of the training as well, so that we can establish an ethical business for training.
Okay. Are there any accredited bodies that you would prefer one over the other? Or
I mean, we don't have, I mean, the accrediting body that we have in Canada, we only have the one which is through the Canadian Nursing Association. Yeah.
okay,
For certifications, we don't have any certified courses in Canada through the CNA. We go through the US.
I see. And as we look towards the future of aesthetic medicine, we suppose that the Wild West era of loose regulation is likely coming to an end. Do you believe that strictly adhering to ethical standards and safety protocols will move from being a moral choice to being the primary risk management strategy for business survival?
Yeah, I would hope that the Wild West is coming to an end, but I don't think it is. I think we still have a long way to go, and it's better than what it used to be for sure. But I think there's still a long way to go to kind of reel in things. I mean, what I'd like to see in the future is more professional posting on social media. Not being an Instagram influencer, but being actually an education influencer, where you are posting on more professional um, industry or more professional knowledge, as opposed
Mm.
to dancing and things like that. That's a whole other thing. But we need to portray our profession in a professional, ethical, positive light, in that we are medical professionals providing medical treatments in a medical setting. And we need
Mm.
to be more aware of our ethical boundaries, our code of ethics.
Mm.
Um, as the specialty matures and becomes under scrutiny from regulators and the public, that taking, ethical lapses or safety shortcuts can carry significant legal or financial and reputation consequences. So I think a clinic that prioritizes patient selection, informed consent, is working within their scope of practice, understands their college regulations,
Mhm.
I think they're going to be better positioned to withstand complaints or adverse events.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tracy, we often talk about ethics as perhaps, a cost, turning away revenue. Can you share a time when, n saying no to a patient actually generated more trust and business in the long term, as compared to otherwise?
I would say that my when I had my practice, a lot of the providers, or sorry, a lot of the patients that came in really appreciated the fact that if I felt that they should not be having a treatment done, then I think I gained more respect and more confidence from that patient than if I had done a
Mm,
treatment that I knew wasn't right for them. So I think if you're ethical, then you're going to gain more trust from your patients, because
okay.
saying and especially like listening to your gut, and if it says that this patient is a red flag and you shouldn't be treating them, then that's
Mm,
just going to be a patient that's going to cause you issues for months and months to come, and you could just be kicking yourself saying, you know what, I shouldn't have treated them. So it's not all about the money, it's about being an ethical provider that will gain you more trust of your patients.
okay. And you have advocated mm, you have advocated that the future of industry depends on stronger education in core safety. So, what is the single biggest educational gap you're currently seeing in the market, that threatens the long-term credibility and safety of the profession?
I would say it goes back to the trainings, the training
Mm,
companies, and I think that's the biggest gap right now. There, like I said, there's some marketing strategies that some training companies will have, saying that they're the best and they're the golden standard, and providing certified injectors after they're finished their program. But those aren't accurate statements, and I think we have to be a little bit more cognizant of how we're marketing our programs.
mm,
I think many providers are trained on how to perform a
mm,
procedure, but not on why to perform. And I think that's one of the most important things, is that they need to know why they're putting so many units into an area, and whether it's going to be shallow or deep into the muscle, and why would it be that, and constantly um, questioning the provider that's taking the course.
mm,
Um, when you're doing that, and you're teaching them how to critically think as you're doing the program, so not just put the needle here and put your units in, you're making them critically think about what they're doing, and looking at different risks and complications that could happen if they didn't follow that. I think training companies need to look at training as a privilege, and this is
mm,
not a money maker. You're not going to get as many people into taking a program just to get
mhm,
more money for the enrollment. I think
mhm,
providers, new providers, I think that they deserve to have one-on-one training. I mean, this is a brand new, it's outside of kind of the scope of our regular nursing. This is a whole specialty that requires really good in-depth training, through facial anatomy, like really doing an in-depth facial anatomy. We have cadaver programs, which are expensive to join the cadaver programs, but I think that that's the best way to learn on
mhm.
complications and injection techniques. And even though it's expensive, you're investing in your future to make yourself a safer and more ethical provider. um, I also am a firm believer in following the public health guidelines. So I think we need to step up our trainings of where our trainings are taking place.
Mhm,
So in a hotel or in a non-clinical environment, isn't following public health guidelines or patient confidentiality. I think that they should be done in a clinic setting where you've got control over the environment, you've got control over um, of people coming in and out of the rooms, confidentiality, instead of patients being exposed to non-regulated professionals, and that we're able to follow public health guidelines.
okay.
So,
So, yeah, go ahead, Tracy. Sorry to cut
no,
you
I
off
was
there.
just going to say I think that is the biggest gap.
I
I think
see.
that
Uh,
it would be really nice to have regulated trainings. Like if there was,
Mm,
you know, and the college isn't going to do that. That's not their position. I think the accreditation, making sure that your, program is accredited, it is vetted by a credentialing body to make sure that it is evidence-based. I think that's a really good step, but it's expensive. A lot of smaller
indeed.
companies aren't going to be able to afford it. It's expensive to be accredited. Um, but there's certain steps that have to be taken.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just coming back to this, since there's not really a formal accreditation body for certifications per se, um, the providers, they need to really consider ethics and safety. Um, as a nurse, you are trained in ethics. You are trained, to care for your patient and to consider their best outcome, right? But when it comes to
Mhm.
aesthetics, it's a bit more artistic.
It is, and it's different than when you're in the hospital and you've got,
Yeah.
you're in the institution and you're kind of covered by everything while
How
you're
would you
in there.
ground yourself? How would you ground yourself really
Yeah.
to
And
understand that the best, being ethical at the end of the day provides not just, a safety net for yourself through compliance, um, but also when it comes to aesthetics, to really maximize that result and that outcome.
mhm. Um, I think what needs to be realized is that, I mean, nurses aren't taught business ethics when we're in nursing school because we're typically working underneath either with a physician or working in the hospital. And I think getting outside of that and then the competition um, that we're faced with by having our own business and entrepreneurial, then I think that's where people kind of get lost in how they think they have to market themselves to be above everybody else. And I think, like I said before, if you're true to yourself and you're authentic, you're true to yourself, and you're um, portraying yourself as a professional, I think that's going to give you more patience. And I think that is what grounds you. And we have to be grounded. We know that as nurses, that our profession is we're self-regulated. And being self-regulated, we have to follow our code of ethics. And I think, all nurses should go back and they should read their code of ethics at least once a year, and because it's constantly changing, like they're changing our code of ethics. So I think, being grounded in your professionalism will
Hmm.
give you a more ethical practice when you're doing your own business.
Hmm. Now, we previously talked about true expertise really requiring true mentorship, right? And having that sense of critical thinking and knowing the whys behind the hows. Um, what is the graduation criteria, and how do you know, perhaps objectively, when a mentee is ready to fly solo?
Yeah, I think it's when we do the training, there is some people that just get it right from the start. Like you just that, and which ones have done all their readings and they finished their courses and everything. Some people just have it, and it is a blend of art and science. So they may have the science part, but they don't have the art part. So it's a combination of both. But I think being a preceptor or having a preceptorship program within a clinic, I think is really important because you can't just finish a weekend course and be expected to fly. There's only so much that you can learn. I think that is the sort of the going trend with training companies is to have that preceptorship afterwards.
Can
And
you
you can,
elaborate a little bit on preceptorship? What does that mean? And how
yeah,
does that look like ideally?
yeah. So if you were to have a preceptor is somebody that's um, has been designated to kind of oversee the new injectors to make sure that they're
Hmm.
being safe, questioning them. So there is a lot of practices that will have a preceptorship, model in their clinics. And I think that's very smart, but not everybody can be a preceptor. So if somebody is wanting to bring in a new injector And to be preceptored, you have to, what the clinic needs to do is to determine who's going to be the preceptor, making sure that they have the ability to stop and go slowly, and ask questions and ask the new injector or the junior injector questions. Um,
Mhm.
and the goal isn't to produce, technically capable providers quickly, but it's to develop them through a thoughtful process. So, like you said, it's the why you're doing something and not the how.
Mhm.
So, if a clinic wants to do a preceptorship program, and
Mhm.
seniority alone isn't going to qualify someone to be a preceptor. So they
Okay.
need to be able to kind of slow down and guide them. Not everybody's a good instructor. So
Mm.
there's certain criteria that would be for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
During those times, how would you address that as a practice owner if you are seeing someone, who is a great injector but isn't a great educator per se?
Educator.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. And we've had some people, so you know, you can certainly reach out and learn how to be an educator. Like there is
Mm.
courses that will teach you how to be an educator, just so that you know that you're asking the right questions and being able to slow and looking at verbal cues on um, when you're overseeing somebody and not making the
Mhm.
patient feel like they're being, you know, giving positive feedback to the
Yeah.
provider and not making them feel, you know, like they're doing something wrong in front of the patient. So there's a fine line between, you know, overseeing them too much, and
Mhm.
you've got to kind of let them fly a little bit on your own, and then you step in when there's something that's, if it's a safety issue, then you would step in.
Right.
But with the preceptorship programs, typically it's, bringing in the new injector, and you're, they're observing in what we call shadowing. So they're just sort of
Mm.
standing in the back of the room and they're watching what's going on. They're looking at that process of, doing the facial assessment, the medical history, deciding what treatments are going to be done, where they're not involved with it, but they're starting to use their critical thinking skills, because you'll see
Yeah.
them in the back and they'll go, "Oh yeah, I was going to say the same thing." So, which is kind of good that you notice that their wheels are turning. And then once you realize that, okay, they do have some critical thinking skills, then they can lead the consultation. So they can propose a
Okay.
treatment and they can lead it. They're not injecting yet, but they're under
Mm.
the supervision still, and they can justify, what was your product selection? Why would you choose that product? How much of that
Mhm.
product would you use? Would you use a needle? Would you use a cannula? So then you're really questioning and getting them to think more and challenging
Mhm.
them on the treatment area, where what risks are in that area, what would you want to do to avoid any, complications in that area. Um,
Mhm.
and then once the preceptor realizes that they are competent to inject, then they would supervise them performing a treatment and seeing how they're doing, kind of staying silent and not, jumping in too quickly, letting them kind of run their own thing. But I mean, if it's a safety issue, yes, you're going to jump in. And then once they're done that treatment, that's where most of the teaching will happen. So you're coming out of the room, not in front of the patient, coming out of the room and
Mhm.
asking them, questions. And again, sort of the why part of what they did. And if they felt, how did they feel doing the treatment? Did it feel good? Did they think they should do anything different? Was there something that was, had a red flag or anything, something they felt uncomfortable with that they want to work on more? And then it's, once the preceptor realizes that, okay, they're okay to go on their own now, then they would be able to do that. So I think
Yeah.
it's a process. It's a process, and I think clinics that do the preceptorship, they will get much better, um, more clinically, more clinical evidence, or more better clinicians, I guess, that will improve the patient outcomes, and it'll be better for the
Yeah.
clinic itself.
Wonderful. Tracy, just to round things out here, what's the golden nuggets of our conversation? What's the number one golden nugget?
What is it? I think it's learning when you're doing a treatment, or you're taking training, you're just getting into this. It's learning the why. Why are you doing something, not just the how, and always questioning. Like the new provider should always be questioning their instructor. Why am I doing this? How come you're putting the needle into that depth? Why are you doing it this way? So I think the more that a new provider can question, the more they're going to be able to clinically, sort of critically think about what they're doing. Um, Facial anatomy is going to be key, and a new provider should invest in taking a facial anatomy lab, I don't like the word cadaver, but doing a facial anatomy lab. That is going to be their best way to learn. That's visual. It's totally different than in a textbook. And, again, it's the training companies just need to take training seriously and make sure that it's based on evidence-based education, it's current education. It's not, and updating things as changes happen. You've got to update your education and your program to be able to go with the evolving. Aesthetics is forever evolving.
Absolutely.
Nothing static.
Absolutely. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Tracey, for joining us at the Business of Aesthetics podcast. And yeah, that's a wrap for the show. A huge thank you to Tracey Hotta for packing 3 decades of wisdom into one conversation. We covered what evidence based practice really means beyond the buzzword, why certified after a weekend is a red flag, and why teaching the why, backed by facial anatomy labs and real preceptorships, sets safe providers apart from recipe followers. And maybe the line that sticks the most: ethics isn't a cost that turns away revenue, it's your best risk management strategy. This episode was brought to you by Equa Marketing, the digital growth partner behind this show. Tracey talked about being the practice that's left standing, built on integrity, not hype. If you want to grow yours with that same standards first mindset, book your complimentary growth plan session at www.businessofesthetics.org/MSM. 60 minutes, no cost, built entirely around your clinic. If this one gave you something to think about, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague who's serious about doing this the right way. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep raising the standard. I'm Don, and this has been The Business of Aesthetics.